This is our 1 in 3 autoethnography with your hosts, Steven and Levi.
On this episode, we'll be talking about sensory overload and how it affects neurodivergent people such as me and Steven.
Steven and I.
Steven and I. Fine.
On this podcast, we talk about our lived experiences with mental illness. So before we get started, you gotta know that we are not medical professionals and you should see your doctor if you're concerned about your mental well-being. So what exactly is sensory overload, Levi?
I would say sensory overload would happen when you're getting more input from your five senses than your brain can go through and process.
Right, and it's basically like living without a filter, if that makes sense. So according to healthline.com, the reference is in the description, by the way, anyone can experience sensory overload, and triggers are different for everyone, but it's associated with autism, sensory processing disorder, PTSD, fibromyalgia, and anxiety and ADHD.
It's a lot easier to understand how sensory overload affects neurodivergent people such as us in the terms of the five senses. So sight, touch, smell, sound, and what's the last one? I forget.
Vision? Did you say that?
I said sight, touch, sound, smell, taste.
Taste. Okay, yeah, you nailed it.
I set an example of how sensory overload can be like hearing too much, like hearing multiple conversations at the same time. And this does happen to me. I'll be sitting in a crowded restaurant with my girlfriend and we'll be eating, or I could be out at a party with a loud party, loud music and people talking everywhere, but I could still hear distinct conversations throughout the room.
Yeah, I had that experience too when I go to restaurants. It's like you hear everything without a filter. So every noise in the background, everything. Like, you go to the restaurant, you can hear like the waiters pushing the carts. You can hear menus flipping. You can hear like the other person's cutlery on the plate.
You can hear about that man flirting with that girl that's obviously no longer interested in him 3 tables across.
Yeah, poor guy. But yeah, no, like it's not just the hearing though. Like in that situation, you would be feeling all of the five senses, right? Like you would feel the clothes on your body if they are uncomfortable, right? You would feel like the heat of the restaurant, and you'd smell the restaurant. You'd maybe smell the person who smells terrible. Like if Levi and I were across in a restaurant, I'd be like very overwhelmed.
I don't shower.
Yeah, that's fair.
I actually do shower. It isn't isolated to one of these senses, but it can seem to, one sense can seem to overwhelm all the other senses. You know what I mean here, Steven? Like in a loud, crowded bar, I might have my hearing being the sense that is being most stimulated. And say if it's a very visual game or anything like that, it might be my vision, or if it's terrible food, it's my taste, but I'm still getting in all this other sensory information from everything else, but one sense seems to be king among them.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's one prominent sense, if you will. So having grown up in a small town, how would you say the transition to living in a city is?
The transition, I'd still like to describe the city as loud, like very loud. I'm still not used to it. Even after 3 years of living here, I'm not used to hearing sirens or vehicles at nighttime or seeing lights everywhere, not being able to see the stars or anything like that.
Or having Steven scream in your ear beside you.
Yeah, that's a funny set of videos though.
You're welcome.
Or even say something small, like I'm not used to not being able to smell, like even like the typically bad sense of like a farm, like manure or anything like that.
Yeah, and it's like once you go to a city, there's so many other smells here.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's the asphalt, there's the grass, there's the vehicles, there's everything. There's the garbage rotting in the gutters.
But I like the way that you put it. Like it's almost like everything is just loud in the city. When you grow up in a small town and you just have not that much stimuli, like how would you describe that experience?
Like describe it in terms of senses?
Yeah.
There was a lot to see and there was a lot to hear if you actually listen, like that sounds really corny, but like
Corny.
We never actually grew anything. It was technically a acreage or a hobby farm, but I did work on a dairy farm and we did grow corn.
Okay, yeah, hilarious. But sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, there'd be a lot to see and touch and everything like that. It still could be definitely overwhelming, if there was a bird singing constantly and also your siblings are yelling at you and also you have to watch out for not being hit by, like your other sibling driving around on the lawn tractor or something like that, And it could still be overwhelming, but it was definitely quiet. It was quiet in the terms of, too, because this was a place that I grew up. I could control my stimuli really easily, and I didn't really understand that I had like this sensory overload until I came to the city, because it wasn't until I came to the city that I actually experienced like what it would be like, because I couldn't control the stimuli around me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the thing about stimuli in small towns or those quieter environments, it's just, it doesn't come at you all at once. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And it's also, when it does come at you, it's smaller.
Yeah, like in a moment, if you were on a small town farm, what would you be seeing? What would you be feeling, hearing,
My place, it would be like, well, it depends on where you are, but like you'd see the outbuildings, you would see if there's any animals, you would see them and hear them and smell them possibly. And you could also hear birds and feel the wind. That's another thing in the city. There's not as much wind. The trees and everything is lush and green in the summer, or stark and white in the winter, which I prefer the winter, but anyways. Or you would hear machinery running, or some project would be being worked on, or something like that, and it's often I associate it with it's hot, because it was always just brutally hot in the summer.
Yeah, like when you're on a farm, I like to think about hot summers. Like you can feel the sun beating down on you.
Yeah, exactly. You can see all the heat waves.
Yeah, you can see the like crops starting to grow. You can smell them maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Or like you can also, like, especially here in Saskatchewan, you can see thunderstorms or rain rolling in from.
Oh yeah, I love the smell of rain. But yeah, it's like it's peaceful, I suppose. It's not like
In a way it's peaceful, yeah, but there's still the, I don't know, like chaotic energy of life,
Oh yeah, like the animals will get angry, or there'll be a semi that drives by on the road that's like incredibly loud, trains going by. Like my experience in a small town, I didn't grow up on a farm, but it was kind of the same deal, like there was traffic, right? But the traffic wasn't like constant. So you'd see cars driving up and down the street, but I lived on Main Street, and
the people driving.
Yeah, exactly. You know the people driving, but there isn't like noise like there would be in the city. Like it's the sound of like wind. It's the sound of maybe a few cars, like maybe a few people talking outside. But I can close my window and go inside, and it's silent, right? And yeah, I guess that's it. There's no like overpowering smells of the city. Like there's no combination. It smells like clean air.
And there's no angry people.
Well, there's less angry people.
Oh, true, yeah.
But yeah, like when you come to the city, what's that experience like? With touch, taste, smell, all that stuff.
The city is a lot more in every way. It's there's so many different things to do all at once. That's overwhelming as well. But there's also so many different things that you have to pay attention to, especially when I drive here. I hate driving in the city for that reason. Like, yeah, it's just terrible. But and there's, I don't know, you have to worry about everything too, it feels like, and you have to, try and stay focused on, say, one thing, but everything else is vying for your attention.
You come to the city, right, from a small town, that semi-peaceful environment where everything isn't happening at once, but the city's just loud, like I don't like to leave my house much, because as soon as I leave, the way I would like paint the picture, so to say, is that like you're walking down the street, right? You see all this constant traffic. You hear the constant traffic, maybe some honking, but there's a lot of braking. You can smell the exhaust from the cars. You can see the stoplights. You can see like the cars flashing. You can see drivers in the windows. You can see people walking up to you and walking away from you. You can feel your clothes, the sun, everything beating down on you, whatever, like you walking on a sidewalk. You can smell all the different smells of the city. It's basically just a lot more chaotic, you know?
One thing I really find about living here is I don't know, it could be just as chaotic back home. I don't know. But one thing I do find is that you can control what your stimulus is. That's the main thing with me. Like, you can't control it here. You can't control the amount of traffic. But say you're in a small town, you can walk for 5 minutes and gone is the traffic, you know? Or you can't control the amount of people or the amount of things here because, you know, they're already here. You're here too now. Like, you can't change the amount of buildings here, for example. Like,
how would you control the other senses when you're in a small town? Because you talked about not seeing vehicles.
the way I mean control is choosing your stimuli. Like, I would choose, say, to hand carve a piece of wood over using, or hand saw the piece of wood over using, say, the chainsaw or the table saw to cut it. Or I would choose, you know, say, hand weeding the garden rather than using the rototiller, you know, just because I don't like all that sound, you know. That's an example. And then, you know, I would choose to eat like regular apples instead of horse apples because, you know, horse apples are just poop and that wouldn't be good.
Right. But what are some of the particular things about some of the senses that stick out to you? Like, let's talk about touch here.
Oh, touch. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it, but let's get into it.
One thing that really stands out to me, just the one really big thing, is if your hands are like wrinkly, you know, you've taken a bath and your hands have soaked. I can't stand that feeling. I can't stand the feeling of somebody with those hands touching me. It drives me insane. And I can't stand the feeling of having wrinkly hands myself. Like, if I have wrinkly hands, I'll wrap them up in the towel after I get out of the shower to dry them. And then I'll hold them at my sides like this until they unwrinkle.
Right.
Like, I'll basically just like T-pose, you know?
Yeah, right.
Or like if I'm laying in bed, like I'll scroll with one finger as my phone lays on the bed because I can't stand the feeling of my fingers.
Right. One of the things about touch that really gets me is like clothes and the type of clothes that I wear. Like, I can't wear baggy sweatpants because you know when you're like, when you wear really baggy sweatpants and you start to walk and then you can feel it like start to brush you. Like, as you're walking, it starts to just kind of flick onto your leg and that just
flaps around.
Yeah, literally.
I hate that feeling too.
Or what were you talking about when you went climbing there? Or not climbing?
Not when I climb, planting. If so yeah, basically you wear hip bags that have shoulder straps, but in your left and right hip bags, you'll have your trees, right? You'll have all your seedlings that you're going to plant. And then you have a smaller back bag. And in your back bag, you'll typically pack, say, your water bottle and your sunscreen and everything like that. But I didn't, because if things were in my back bag, they would swing. My back bag would swing every time I planted a tree, and it'd just like lightly tap against me. And I just couldn't stand that because it would so distracting.
Yeah. And it's almost hard to explain that to other people without sounding crazy.
And it's like, it seems like something you should be able to get used to or tune out. But for me, it was the same feeling every single time it happened, you know?
Yeah, and it's so irritating because in these environments, it's not just the isolated sensation, right? Like, there's still going to be all of your five senses sensing other stuff.
Well, especially when it was hot and windy, or not hot and windy, or if it was hot and muggy and, you know, buggy, and you have to watch for bears and...
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, there's so much going on already, but this one thing is the thing that kind of just like sends you over, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I have had breakdowns, like went to my room crying because of just how loud the city is. Like, I am exhausted after going out, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Another thing about touch is unwanted touch. Like, I'm okay with most people touching me, but if it's someone, or if it's some sort of touch that I don't know is coming, it often is very overstimulating in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Like, not just because it's shocking. Like, like any sort of touch. If I'm sitting, say, in a lecture hall or at a table or anything like that, and someone's arm is brushing against me or someone's leg is brushing against me, even just like a tiny little bit, it's so annoying. It's so irritating.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It happened multiple times. No, just like strangers in my lecture hall, man, kept touching me. I don't know. I felt like being like, hey, man, just stop.
In those situations, how does it feel for you?
It's not just that it's like the feeling is like you can intensely feel every single second of that touch. It's not just that. It's also the fact that it's just distracting me because I keep focusing on this touch rather than doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Like you'd be focusing on that sensation rather than the lecture.
Yeah, definitely.
Going back to being like physically touched, I also hate it. Like if someone touches me, I don't expect it. It makes me super uncomfortable and I can't really deal with it. I can't focus on anything else other than that. Or even if like people I'm close to touch me, I hate it. I don't know. It's just a lot.
I haven't touched you really that much. Like even like friendly touchings, I don't really do that.
No, I hate it. It's terrible. You know, because again, like it's almost like there's no filter. Like in my experience with my ADHD and anxiety, everything is just unfiltered. So it's loud. Like if someone touches me, I'm not going to be able to not focus on that.
Often with sensory overload, it's as if you also have for certain things just instantly trigger sensory overload. Like I could be having a fine day and being able to tune things out, but as soon as one thing happens to me or one extra thing is added, suddenly I'm unable to tune anything out. It's like a good example of that would be, say, I don't know, at a party, and you're fine, you're just having a good time, and then all of a sudden, say, you, I don't know, spill your drink, say, on your pants or something, and then that wet feeling of that clothing just suddenly makes it so that you can't filter anything else out because you're so focused on this wet piece of clothing, you know? And then, like, you can hear everything and you can feel everything and you taste all the terrible alcohol you've been drinking and everything like that.
And that's why it's like overwhelming to be in certain social situations, right? Because it's not always like that. Like there's not always one sensation that's going to trigger you per se. But being in high stimulus environments, like I would say I'm kind of conflicted about it, you know, because with my ADHD, it's hard for me to be bored. I talked about this last episode. It's hard for me to be bored. So if I'm in low stimulus environments, I'm going to feel like shit. But then I go to a high stimulus environment, I'm going to feel good for a little bit, but it's like a gamble, you know? So in my situation, I much rather just avoid things completely rather than have that risk of being overwhelmed. And that's why I hate going shopping and going out.
It's not just sensory overload, it's also sensitivity to certain senses, you know, certain things.
Yeah, like having a higher baseline of sensitivity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like me with the touching with the shower hands. Like I'm fine like in the shower if I'm wet and everything, but as soon as my hands get wrinkly and I'm out of the shower, then it's just horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like my shower hands, there's certain tastes that I can't stand too.
And what are those?
Well, I don't like the taste of my hands in the shower.
Okay, yeah. You like to taste your hands in the shower?
No, I don't like the taste of them in the shower.
Okay, yeah, sorry, you just said that. I should be listening.
Yeah, come on. I like the taste of my hands out of the shower.
Okay, yeah, fair. But like food, I suppose. You eat food, right?
Yeah, of course I eat food. I don't like the taste of certain herbs. Really just, I can't stand the taste. If it's on a piece of meat or something, or if it's in a food, it just like throws the entire dish off for me. And I'm sure that's the same with a lot of different people. But it's also certain foods and tastes and even like scents and stuff, because scenting, or not scenting, smelling and everything like that is also related to taste. But certain things like that can also just be incredibly overstimulating, like strong perfumes or strong tastes, even certain strong tastes for me.
So what type of foods like trigger you, Levi?
Definitely like overly sweet foods, because it's just so much sensation at one time. And it's the same with, say, overly salty food. Like that, you remember that macaroni that I accidentally dumped like half a box of salt in the first year?
I do not remember that, no.
Yeah, well, we were drunk and I was making macaroni, and that was some salty macaroni. But yeah, overly sweet foods. Like I don't like whipped cream, or, well, it's not super sweet, but it's also the texture of the food. So like the texture of whipped cream, just, I hate it. I hate that mouthfeel, you know? It feels like, to me, it's like coating the entire inside of my mouth, and it like ruins my ability to taste anything else other than this nasty whipped cream, you know? And then with overly sweet foods, it feels like it's just eating my teeth away.
Yeah, so it's like eating is a lot more than just the taste of things.
Yeah, it's also like there's this weird mental aspect that comes into it when I eat certain foods.
And does that make you like a picky eater? Like, would you avoid certain foods then?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say I avoid any food that I've had a bad experience with in the past, because I just can't stand having another bad experience with it.
Like bad experiences, and when you make something when you're drunk, or bad experience like you fought one of these foods, like your ex cheated on you with tomato or something.
I don't like raw tomatoes, but I do like cooked tomatoes. No, bad experience as in Steven tried to make a food containing one of these things.
Whoa. Okay, listen, I can actually cook now.
You can't cook.
I wouldn't say I'm a better cook than you, but
how was the chicken you just had tonight?
Mediocre at best.
Actually, yeah, that was a pretty bad chicken.
2 out of 10 maybe.
Yeah, but what about do you remember when you overcooked and undercooked rice at the same time?
Yes.
How do you do that?
It was good rice.
That was not good rice.
It was really good rice. If you guys could have tasted it, you would have liked the rice.
Crunching on your rice at the same time as it's turning to mush in your mouth.
Yeah, okay. If I'm eating something soft and there's something crunchy in it, that makes me want to like...
It makes me want to spit it out.
Yeah. I was going to say something a little more extreme, but...
Oh, me too. But yeah, it's like... Or throw up in a way. Or that... The texture of foods. It's also why I'm a picky eater. I don't like raw tomatoes, partly because of their taste, but also partly because of their texture. It's that...
You quote unquote had a bad experience with them.
Yeah, whatever. No, it's the... it's the watery... weird texture of them, but at the same time, like, I like oranges, but they have a defined texture, you know? But
yeah.
With tomatoes, it kind of just falls into a watery mush.
Right. I don't relate to you with tomatoes, but I can understand. I empathize.
So like, is there any textures that you like absolutely hate? Like crunchy and mushy at the same time as in your rice?
That was good rice, man.
I don't know why you defend this rice. You wanted to throw this rice out as much as I did.
I'm defending the rice because I'm just being spiteful.
You ate some more of it than I did, but...
Well, I mean, okay, you ate it too.
We were starving.
Well, was I drunk?
No, I think we were doing... That was when we were unwittingly doing OMAD.
Oh, yeah, okay. I do...
We had eaten nothing that day.
Yeah, so Wait, didn't I cook the rice for like 50 minutes too? Like I cooked it for a while.
You cooked it for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like in the time I made the meat, you cooked the rice.
Oh. Well, that was good rice. At least there was
What happened was
rice.
You put too little water in at the start.
Yeah.
I think.
And then I think I put in more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as all the water was already evaporated. Well, that's not my fault. I don't like cooking.
Fair.
But some of the tastes for me, or textures, I guess, are things that are bitter. Like I cannot stand anything that's bitter or acidic, like lemons, oranges. I can eat oranges, but I hate the smell of oranges. I hate things that are just acidic. I don't know why, but it ruins food for me. So I'll try to avoid things like that.
What about like you mentioned smells there. Is there any smells that like other than oranges?
You?
Oh, thank you. I do smell like a dairy farm. Well, I used to.
Yeah. In terms of food, smells like I guess anything that's like too overpowering or sweet, like you were talking about before. Anything that's just like not salty, I guess. Because I like salt too, but
No, just like any type of scent, like perfumes or natural scents or anything like that.
oh, any type of scent. Definitely perfumes because they're very overpowering. You know.
Because of their scent is so overpowering, it's like they become prominent scents, like we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nothing's really coming to mind for me right now. Like, oh, I'm gonna reverse the Uno reverse of the question on you. What type of senses or what type of scents do you dislike? I suppose.
I really dislike very strong, like, what's it called? I forget the brand name, but those aerosols that you spray in your house.
Like Febreze.
Yeah. Anything that's like lavender Febreze type scent. I hate that smell. It sets me off so bad.
Oh yeah, honestly, like any artificial scent is just I can't do it. They're always overpowering.
Yeah. Looking at common triggers for sensory overload, and it said swimming in lakes was one. And I very much relate to that because I can't swim in lakes, like, at all.
What makes you unable to swim in lakes?
I hate it. It terrifies me. And it's also like the sand on the bottom, and then you step on a sharp rock, and then there's seaweed. Oh, when you touch seaweed when you're swimming in a lake or some other body of water, I can't do it. It terrifies me. The one time we were out canoeing with in grade 11 for preparation for a canoe trip or something like that, and there was like a whole bunch of seaweed in our little lake in our town, and I like put my hand in the water because I thought it'd be cool, but it just I could not do it. It freaked me out. And when I swim in a lake too, I'm scared of fish coming up and biting my toes.
Have you like put on shoes while you were on the beach, but then there's still sand on them, and you leave, and then you feel sand in your toes and on your shoes
Forever.
I hate that so much.
No, the worst thing is swimming in a lake. I don't even I'll wade into lakes, right? And I'll swim in the water, but I won't touch the bottom. I won't touch anything around me, but the water's okay if I'm in the shallows. If I'm deep in the water, no, fish will bite my toes off.
What about hearing? We haven't really talked about anything like that. What sounds would start to make you overwhelmed? You know what's one for me? Sorry, I asked the question, but the sound of people chewing. Okay, like you know what I'm talking about. I don't think I have to explain it.
No, I don't. I don't even have to. People could chew with their mouths open in front of me. I don't care.
Really?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't bother you at all? Like you hear this smacking and their teeth clicking, and it's just
no, I don't really care.
It's so much. Like it doesn't disgust me or anything. It just bothers me for some reason. I don't know.
You are a bit of an audiophile too, though.
Yeah, that's true. How would you describe your experience with the sound in the city? Not one isolated sound. Like,
yeah. In the city, it's terrible. You can hear sirens. You can hear cars. You can hear people yelling at their neighbors. You can hear everyone else's music. You can hear the people having conversations as they walk down the street. You can hear far too many things. You can hear people's music inside of their cars and people's music inside of their headphones as they walk next to you down the street. Or you hear like inside of restaurants, or like when the door opens to a restaurant and you get that burst of sound, from inside the restaurant. That's really overwhelming.
Yeah. So it's not like there's always certain triggers for senses. It's like the culmination of everything. Like there's not always going to be one distinct sensation.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not really a feeling per se. It's an emotion, and it's just painful for me when Levi doesn't appreciate my cooking. But that's besides the point.
Well, actually, a serious thing about this is
serious.
In my own life, to an extent, my sensory overload does get tied with an emotional response, right?
Like what do you mean by that?
So like everything's overwhelming me and there's so many different things going on. I do get, say, panicky, or it triggers a frustrated or angry response in me because I can't focus on doing the one thing that I want to do, or I can't, have a good time at a party because I can hear and feel everything going on. And, it makes me frustrated. It makes me angry in some situations.
Yeah. I can understand that because sometimes I experience the same thing too. When I'm overwhelmed by all the sounds, sights, whatever, it feels like I just can't handle it. So I shut down. Like I get really anxious, and all I want to do is just like lock myself in my room, not feel anything or think or experience anything, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And then also, it almost triggers I don't know. Sometimes it's like fight or flight in me too.
Yeah, no, I think it does trigger the fight or flight response.
Oh,
I
actually,
can look into it, but
okay.
okay. Yeah, no, I'm on the old Google right now, and I pulled it up here. The fight or flight response actually does happen with sensory overload.
Yeah, then that definitely makes sense as to why you feel anxious. You know, if this happens to you, and even why I would feel frustrated or angry too. You have so much adrenaline and emotion rushing through you.
But how do you think that comes off to someone if you're just out in public and then you have an outburst, you know, because your pants are hitting you?
Yeah, it definitely comes across as, I don't know, picky or high maintenance.
Yeah, like I've heard a lot of get over it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to get over it, right? I'm trying to deal with this, say, one thing or set of things that's triggering me, but I can't because it keeps happening. And that's all I can focus on. And you aren't helping me in any way by saying, get over it.
Because that's literally another stimulus. It's like another thing you have to think about. How do you normally react when you are overwhelmed by senses, I suppose?
I sit there a lot and I try and say it's something hitting me or something like that. I just move away from it, stop the stimulus, just get rid of it, you know. Or if I'm in a crowded place, I'll go somewhere more quiet, you know, and just sit there for a bit and try and, you know, calm down before I can go back out. Or, you know, I do sometimes just deal with it, you know, like I just carry on. Like I can't really change anything, so I just have to I do have to deal with it, you know.
Yeah, and that's fair, but as you were saying before, when you're in the city, you can't really control that stuff. When you're in a small town, it's definitely easier. So if you can't get away from something, I suppose, how do you react usually?
If I couldn't get away from something, I would have definitely a negative-ish reaction. You know, it's the sort of panicked, sort of wanting to fight this person who keeps touching my leg. But given enough time, I just sort of become numb to everything that's coming in. And then it's like, I can just sit here and not pay attention to anything. Just let everything, whatever, all the stimuli can come and hit my ears and eyes and nose and whatever. And I'll just sit here and deal with it until this is over in, say, half an hour or whenever it is. And no.
Yeah. But I think the most challenging part about being more sensitive for me is when you're trying to do something, right? Because it's so distracting to have just feel everything without a filter. Like if you're out in public trying to shop, if you're trying to drive, if you're trying to talk to someone and you hear everything, you feel everything more, and you see everything, it's just, it's so much.
Yeah, you can't shut down the outside world, and that's almost why, that's what I was getting at. I shut down internally sometimes in these situations just because I can't change it, so I'll just ignore everything.
Like, is that usually how you feel better if your senses are overwhelming you?
Oh, no, definitely. I don't feel better when it's like that. It's a coping mechanism, right? It's something that I can do so that I don't lose my cool or snap.
Yeah, because again, you can't like shut down the outside world or anything, and it's just loud. So honestly, the only thing to do is avoid things.
Yeah, if it's something you can't avoid, you miss one of your certain obligations.
Right. So I suppose in terms of like being overwhelmed by all your senses because of a culmination of things, you can't. There's not much you can do to remedy that. But I suppose for it would be helpful for me to identify things that are triggering that I could avoid, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
If I reflected on some of these senses that I talked about, I could avoid a lot of this stuff. But again, when you're in the city, it's like no matter what you do, there's always going to be sound, and I hate that.
For me, another thing is visuals too. Like so much.
Oh yeah, we never talked
so
about
much
visuals.
blocking my view. You know, so many buildings, so many shining lights, so many windows that glare and people inside them that you can pay attention to and everything, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not too bothered by visual stimulus. What about it, I guess, is overwhelming for you?
Well, I mostly notice it if I'm driving. Then visual stimulus is very overwhelming because, I don't know, I triple shoulder check and everything every single time because I see a light pole and all the grass, but I didn't look at the road because there was the light pole and all the grass to look at, you know?
Yeah, like there's so much to look at because in the city you have like all these flashing, basically everything's trying to grab your attention. Everything. There's just so much, you know. But yeah, when there's like so much going on and you're struggling with something like ADHD, which is attention regulating, it's really hard to pinpoint one thing because I have trouble prioritizing things too. So if I'm driving, I'm like, what's going to be more important? Looking at the road, shoulder checking, or like checking out that cool sign over there because it looks funny, you know?
But yeah, it's there's all this visual stimulus right here in my direct field of view, and I can see it all at once, right? Yeah. So it's like I can pick individual things out of my field of view, right?
Exactly. And that would just be you isolating one sense. Like you would still be dealing with the smells of your car, the sounds of your car, and all that other stuff. So it makes it even more difficult to be focused on one thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's like nothing in my vision carries any extra weight over the others, even if they should.
Yeah, which is probably pretty dangerous, but I think I have that same experience with basically all of my senses, and that's why it's difficult for me to be in the city because, well, like you said, we'll go back all the way back to the start. You're sitting in a restaurant with someone that you care about, you know, you're having supper, their rice is cooked well, but like you hear everything, you feel everything, and you're supposed to be focused on the conversation with them, but there's so much going on around you. Like you can't choose what you're going to focus on, you know?
Yeah, that's another thing. The example of the restaurant there too, it's like when the waitress comes over and asks if your food's good and you haven't even realized that you realize you've been eating and not really tasting the food because you've been trying to take in all your other stimulus, but you have been tasting the food. You just don't really recollect, or you haven't been able to pick out the taste of your food over all the other senses coming in.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, you know, maybe this rice isn't half bad.
Oh no, maybe this rice isn't good. Maybe it's really bad.
Well, maybe if we had like music playing and stuff going on, you wouldn't have noticed, but that's just me. Again, it's hard to remedy that, you know, like I don't have any tips. Like I don't know how I deal with it. I just, again, kind of deal with it, but I suppose it would be helpful if you're with people that they understand this isn't just you being high maintenance, right? Like it's a part of your condition, basically.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be helpful. Also, just, you know, understanding your own stimulus and like, or what triggers your overstimulation, and just understanding what it is in general can be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Because before I knew that this was a condition of mental illness, I used to just...
Well, not even mental. It can happen in anyone, right? But more often seen.
Yeah, before I considered that, I thought like, for some reason, back to the idea of masculinity. And I was like, Steven, you shouldn't be feeling bad about being in the city with all these like sounds and stuff. Like, man up.
Yeah. I also thought that same way. Like,
but what is man up gonna do for that?
Yeah, like, Levi, quit being overwhelmed by the sounds in a restaurant. Like, just man up, be more of a man.
Like, you aren't allowed to feel so much. Like, what?
How does that help me right now?
It makes no sense.
I know.
But yeah, I suppose if you learn some of those things about yourself, which are overwhelming, it could be helpful. But I think it would also be helpful if you had like a partner or someone that you're close to who could kind of recognize when you're starting to shut down, I suppose.
Yeah. Or you're starting to become panicky, you know? I find it difficult to tell when I am. I know. And I've had people be like, Levi, are you okay? Like, you're like flipping out here. And I didn't realize that. So yeah, I definitely agree that having a partner or someone who you trust there with you, or even just someone who can recognize that in you, it would definitely be good.
I'm definitely going to include some references that have more tips than this if I can find them. So yeah, I guess moral of the story, or what we should take away from this episode, is that
we got new mics.
Yeah, we did get new mics, if you guys haven't noticed.
It's also the fact that even if you do find all these things overstimulating and you can't deal with that, it's okay to feel like that. And it's okay to say not like tomatoes or half-cooked rice or anything like that. And to find these different textures and things overwhelming.
If you do struggle with some of these things, like, I want to tell you, you're not a picky eater. You're not high maintenance. You're okay. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty for having things that overwhelm you, I suppose, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess that's basically it.
Thank you.
So yeah, if you guys like this episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram at our1in3podcast and to subscribe to us on whatever you're listening to.
The resources and references for this episode will be found in the description, and if you want to learn more about this topic, then please check them out.
So once again, I got to say that we are not medical professionals, and you should talk to your doctor if you're concerned about your mental well-being. So yeah, that's it. Go make rice. Maybe. I'm not allowed to make rice anymore.